Well, hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Unlock Show. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson. My pleasure to be here with you guys today. You are in for a real treat. As you can see on the screen, I have got somebody amazing with me today, all the way from Dallas in the US, and this is the amazing Sarah St. John. Her and I have just been having a great conversation behind the scenes, talking all things podcasting, live shows, and you guys are going to hear all about that today. So our intention is to share with you, if you've got a business, should you actually start a podcast? And we might get a little bit controversial and even tell you, the reasons why you shouldn't be podcasting or you shouldn't be creating your own live show. Most of you guys know that I prefer this platform. I prefer to do share my knowledge, my expertise, interviews, etc., using a live show. And a lot of you guys have been asking about, what do I do about turning this live show into a podcast? So the whole podcasting side of things is a real hot topic of the moment. And so I reached out to Sarah and said, hey, you've been doing this for a while. You've been getting some awesome results, been doing some really cool stuff with your podcast. How would you like to come and share your amazingness with our guests? So not only is Sarah a podcaster, but she's also she also is an author, an animal lover, and a world traveler. She loves getting out and about. She's created many startups over the last I would say about 10 years, the last decade or so. Hey, Sarah.
Yeah, over a decade.
Yeah. So she's got some cool stuff that we're going to share with you. So if you hang around to the end, we're going to give you a couple of links where you can go and get some free stuff from Sarah that is either going to help you get going with your podcast, either help you start your online business, or even help you write your own book. So hang around and we'll make sure that we give all of them to you. As per normal, you guys know the drill. This is a live show, so you guys can be asking questions. So if you want to ask a question of us, all you've got to do, just make sure that you click the button that says allow StreamYard to see you, and then you're able to type in the comment section if you're on Facebook or you're watching right now on YouTube, and both Sarah and I will make sure that we answer your questions. So that being said, welcome to the show, you amazing Sarah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That was a great intro.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, hey, let's talk a little bit about, I suppose, knowing podcasting has been around since, around about 2004. And it has really started to, it wasn't until sort of 2019 where it really started to hit its strides, right? And people kind of twigged on that, hey, this might be a great way for me to, to start marketing my business, because from a business point of view, we're always looking at ways that we can start, marketing ourselves to get our message and our information out to more people. So let's talk a little bit about your journey and how did you come to start your own podcast, and why did you do it?
Sure. Yeah. So it's kind of a little of a long story. So, like, over a decade ago is when I started my entrepreneurial journey back in 2008. And I had 6 different jobs that year, not at the same time, but throughout the course of the year. Realized that, working for someone else wasn't really my thing, and that I wanted to be my own boss. And so I started with a photography business, but I realized that while I like taking photos of animals, landscapes, architecture, I didn't like taking photos of people, but that's where the money is. I was doing weddings and portraits. Um, but the bigger issue was the expense to maintain equipment and lighting and software and all that. So I decided to switch to an online business model, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I tried a bunch of different things like drop shipping, affiliate marketing, blogging. I had my own little t-shirt company. And that's cool. Those things pop up. Hi,
Yeah, I
Robin
don't see,
Helm.
but hi, Robin.
I'm not used to that. Threw me for a loop for a second. Anyway, and so I tried a bunch of different things, and it was kind of in that process that I discovered all these free or affordable tools, resources, software that you could use to run a business online on a budget. So I thought of the idea of writing a book, which I called Frugalpreneur, and to kind of go over the different types of online businesses, how to run them affordably. And then while I was writing the book, I was like, well, maybe I should, create a podcast also called Frugalpreneur to just coincide with the book launch, extra marketing, but it was only going to be like 10 episodes or something. Basically, I interviewed like CEOs or people that worked within some of the software programs that I recommend throughout the book. Um, but I was getting more leverage and traction with the podcast than even the book. Love the connections I was making, the networking. And so I kept it going. And so I've been doing the podcast for, let's see, I guess it would be 2.5 years now. And I have, I think, about 140 episodes or so.
I think you might be up to about 150 odd. I think I checked this morning, and it
Ah,
was you were. I think don't quote me on this, but I think the number I saw was something like 158. So it takes a bit
oh.
of consistency to get to that point.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think that is counting, like, because some of my episodes were just, like, quick little 30-second things for, like, that month's giveaway, just announcing it.
Uh-huh.
So I think, like, for actual episodes, it's around 140-ish. But, yeah,
All
that's
right.
somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm. Super cool. Well, what's interesting, right? I mean, how fascinating, kind of going through having those moments of, gosh, I'm going from job to job to job, and then going, I want to find a different way, playing with a few different things, because that's actually what the online space is like, right? Like you start out in it and you I'm going to say dabble in a few things, and then you kind of find your sweet spot. And it's funny because often, like you said, I'm going to start this podcast just to promote the book that I'm doing, where the book was to be the thing. And then, you were going to do something else to promote the thing. And then the podcast ends up kind of slapping you in the face and saying, actually, this is the platform you should be utilizing. This is giving you some really good traction. I mean, I had a look at some statistical data, and, what we're looking at right now is something like, 700,000 podcasts that kind of started that were around pre-COVID. And then we had the pandemic kind of kick in, and lots of people being at home, and then a whole lot of people going, hey, I want to start something else too. Maybe I should get on, I'm going to say, on the podcasting bandwagon, right? And so then we saw this massive influx of podcasts kind of hitting the market, and I think we're up to something like 1.5 million new podcasts came. 1.5 million was the number of podcasts that were on those platforms just after COVID. So just the first few months of COVID, the podcasting space exploded.
Mhm.
But what's quite interesting about that, isn't it, that even though that is the case, only half of them are actually considered active podcasts.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
So I think, okay, so like you said, so for between 2004 to like 2019, 15 years, it was like 7 or 800,000 podcasts. And then it more than doubled within like a year. And I think a lot of that does have to do with COVID because people are at home, they have more time. Maybe it's a new hobby, but I think probably a lot of those podcasts maybe aren't active anymore, or kind of faded out, or what they call as refer to it as pod fade. The
Mm-hmm.
average number of podcasts that someone actually puts out is 7 to 10, and then
Mm-hmm.
they pod fade.
They
So
fizzle out.
so you and I were like, I wouldn't say
Well,
1%, but whatever,
I think I
10%.
think the statistic on that is 6%.
Oh,
I think I
6%.
read, yeah. So when I
Wow.
was doing a bit of research a couple of weeks ago, the number was 6%. 6% of people actually make it to their 10th episode. So isn't
Oh,
that
wow.
interesting? So that's pretty cool, right? That you get to the point, hey, look, my seat's just gone down. So hold on a minute. Let me just, raise myself back up so you guys can actually see me. So let me do that. So it's like 6% of people actually get to the point where they actually create their 10th episode. So for you, getting to 140 odd, you are absolutely in the minority. Like
Mhm.
when we think about that, those numbers, you know, what are your thoughts on the opportunity that exists with that?
Yeah, so I think the reason, kind of going back to the last question, the reason maybe is because people are back at work, a lot of people anyway, and so now maybe they don't have the time to keep their podcast going, and it was more of a passion project maybe than something sustainable. But I think one big reason I think for pod fading is because people don't realize going in how much work a podcast takes, at least the post production. Um,
Mm.
I mean, there are some people who record and just put it up and that's the end of it. But most people, I mean, it's ideal to do some post production. And I think just the editing and then social media sharing and doing like different clips and then sending it out to your email list or this, that, and the other. There's like a million steps, and people just get overwhelmed because I found that for every hour I've spent recording, it takes probably about another 5 hours to, completely to edit, produce, to put in the intro and the outro or the call to action or whatever, to create audiograms, put them on social, send out the email, all that stuff. Um, so I think that's kind of the big problem, is either the lack of time, the lack of technological knowledge, uh, or some people I think probably assume that, as soon as you launch a podcast that you're going to have a million downloads or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But last I checked, it takes about 3 years of having a podcast consistently to really see like a big, um,
Mm-hmm.
it
It's like
takes
this.
time.
It's a compounding effect, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I agree with you. I mean, creating this sort of stuff, it becomes I'm going to say a labor of love.
Mm.
Like you and lucky for I mean, I particularly like it. It's like the highlight of my week, being able to come and chat with people and be live. But I think one of the key things is, like you say, they underestimate how much time and effort it's going to take. And I think to overcome that, what you need to be really clear on at the beginning is why. Like, what's your intention? What are you actually trying to do here? And I think if you misalign your intention with, what is it that I'm trying to create, with um, what you actually create, and then you don't get that result. For example, let's say I want to create a podcast for my business because I need sales tomorrow.
Hmm.
You're going to be bitterly disappointed when you find that, gosh, it's not, I'm not getting the traction that I want. This thing is not creating or bringing me in, sales next week. What you want to understand, like Sarah's saying, is that this is something that you want to commit to, and I would highly recommend. This is absolutely a platform that you want to dive into, but don't dive into it without a real sense of commitment and uh, being willing to show up on a regular basis, and create your podcast and deliver real value that you're prepared to do over a long period of time. It's a cross country run that never ends, not a sprint.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I recommend, being consistent, putting out at least an episode a week, ideally. Some people might do bi-weekly, or some people do, you know, t- 2 or 3 episodes a week, or even every day, though that's pretty rare. But I think as long as you're putting out an episode a week, that's manageable. And um, one thing that I recommend is batching, where you
Mm-hmm.
maybe record a few episodes in a particular day and then maybe you edit them and but I also found last year during the pandemic and everything, I had more time. So I was kind of taking advantage of it by doing a whole bunch of episodes. And it got to the point where I was backlogged, or I had like 40 episodes waiting.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I stopped doing interviews for the last several months and just been focusing on getting those edited and put out. I think I only have like 3 left from those 40. I was just looking at my thing on the wall, like telling me how many more I have to do. Actually, after this, I'm going to edit one and put one out. But yeah, I think after that one, I'll have 3 left of those 40 that I recorded. Because the thing is, it's good to batch, but don't get too crazy, because um then your guests will start like asking, where's my episode? I mean, it could take 6 months to put it out if you're that
Mm-hmm.
far out. So, and I started having to release like 3 a week. For a while there, I was doing like releasing 1 a day. So anyway, so kind of in the process, I'm learning as I'm going, like, batch, but don't get crazy with it. Don't over batch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is great because we can kind of, you and I can sort of talk about this stuff from 2 different perspectives, right? So, I mean, that whole concept of doing your, your podcast and batching, as opposed to something like this type of platform that you and I, this type of format that you and I are doing right now, which is a live show. And so I've done both. And I think it's one of those things, this is also a question you want to answer for yourself before you get going. Do you prefer to do video? Do you prefer to just do audio? Do you prefer to do one take? Do you prefer to, are you a bit of a perfectionist that will sort of talk about something? Oh gosh, I got that wrong. I'm going to say it again. I personally found myself in that space when I was just trying to do podcasting on its own and not going live. For me, doing live video works really, really well because you don't have time really to think about it. What you say is what you say, what you get is what you get. And usually they turn out much better than if I were to pre-record. But that's just me. And I think that's one of the things that that people would need to, that you want to think about before you even dive into whether it's a live show or whether it's some form of podcast, is what is your preferred method of, I suppose, communicating? Do you want to do the batch method like Sarah's talking about, which works particularly well for people that are busy and that enjoy doing that sort of thing? And then there's their live, just go live, whether it's a podcast or a live show, actually going live and being live with your audience at that time. And as you saw, I'm going to say one of the other little benefits or major benefits of being live is that as you saw earlier, Sarah was like, oh, hey, what's that? I've never seen. And what I had done, for those of you that are actually listening to on a podcast, it's because this is a live show, we're getting live comments come in as we're talking. So I'm popping them up onto the screen. And the first one I popped up, Sarah was like a bit thrown. What's that? That's something new that I'm not familiar with. So again, there's some little, I'm going to say, nuances that you do in podcasting that maybe is a little bit different with live show. But it comes down to that intention, right? Is like, once you've got the intention right, you know why you're doing your podcast or live show, you plan it out at the outset, you're going to have more chance of being successful and being around for a lot longer than you would if you just dove in for the heck of it because I'm going to do a podcast because everybody's doing it.
Yeah, that's funny. It seems like, everybody knows what a podcast is now. And like, there's TV shows now about, there's one, I think it's on Hulu, called Only Murders in the Building. But it's about them. It has Martin Short, Steve Martin, and Selena Gomez. They all live in this apartment building. Someone gets killed in it, and they try to solve it by creating a podcast. But anyway, so, and there's other shows. There was a show called God, what was it? God Unfriended Me, or God Friended Me, or something like that. But yeah, it's like becoming part of every day. Like, everyone knows what a podcast is, whether they've listened to one or not, and it's just becoming more and more popular. Um, I think you had mentioned beforehand about like with Spotify and, um, you know, Joe Rogan getting an exclusive deal for like, I think 100 million or whatever.
Oh,
So
a lot.
yeah, and more of those types of things are happening. Um, but yeah, when you go into podcasting, don't go in with the expectation or intention of trying to land some big deal like that. I don't think that that's the way most people make money. Podcast, that's like 1%, if
Mm-hmm.
that's how they make their money podcasting. It's more the way I look at it for business is that if you already have a business, that podcasting is just another kind of avenue or marketing or exposure, a way for people to find you, get to know, like, and trust you,
Mm.
become familiar with you and whatnot. Because the thing I think that's different about podcasting versus definitely compared to blogging, but even videos on YouTube, is that with podcasting, they don't have to involve their eyes. They're not having to look at anything. So it doesn't dedicate
Mm-hmm.
all their attention. So they could be driving, they could be doing the chores, cooking, whatever, and be listening to a podcast. So they're much more inclined to listen to an hour-long show than if they need to read a blog, read a book, go to a YouTube channel to learn something. They might have 10 minutes, because
Mm.
they have other things to do. Now you could uh, listen to something on YouTube. I put my podcast episodes on YouTube. Well, I started by it just being the audio and
Mm-hmm.
turned it into like an audio podcast. Like an audio video on YouTube. But now,
Audiogram. Yeah.
yeah, well, that too. But now I record my interview. I don't go live, though. I'm liking this and I'm considering maybe I should try this, but I do record video, and so I'll put the video
Mm-hmm.
up of the interview. And so some people might go to YouTube and listen that way and not actually be watching it. But I think for the most part, I think that's what makes podcasting different, or
Mm.
maybe a more popular medium. And then I think earlier you had asked about uh, like as far, I think what you were trying to get at was about saturation, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But compared to blogs and YouTube channels, podcasting is, because last I knew there were like 600 million blogs, though I'm sure that's higher.
Mm-hmm.
That's higher now. I think that was back in 2020. And then I forget how many YouTube channels, but somewhere around there. Whereas podcasting is like, maybe 2 million. And they're not all active either, as we already talked about. It's definitely a lot less saturated than blogging or having a YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think for a lot of reasons, it just makes sense for businesses to have a podcast. And of course, you could try to start a business, which is the podcast itself, by getting, sponsorships and stuff like that. But that's kind of hard to do, especially starting out. So I recommend more of an approach of getting business kind of on the back end of the podcast. Like the podcast is how people learn about you, versus like getting paid directly from the podcast. Because, with merch or sponsorships or ads or even like Patreon support or donations,
Mm-hmm.
because that can be done, but it's not going to be generally enough to support you.
Absolutely. I mean, there's loads and loads of different ways that you can monetize your podcast. But like you say, I mean, the primary way would be, you've already got a business or you're creating a business that's in total alignment with your podcast and or your live show. And you're talking about things that are in alignment with that business. And therefore, as people get to know you, like you, trust you, they're interested then in what products do you have? And maybe I might want to enter your ecosystem. I might want to buy some of your product. And generally speaking, that's how, that's That's how you find clients for your business. That's certainly how clients come to me, is through listening to the show and the podcast, and then they're like, hey, how do you do this? Like you just said, hey, now I'm on here, I've been a podcaster, but what is this? How does this work? Like, how can I do that too? So it's that sort of stuff that people get to see, and they also get to, from a podcasting or sharing your information. It really doesn't matter what we call it, the anchor platform or platform you decide to use. It's showing your expertise. It's sharing your knowledge, your expertise and your experience with others. And often that's what people will want to purchase from you is, hey, can you now help me do what you're doing?
Yeah, and I think with the live podcasting, a benefit to that, as far as I understand, that the various like social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook, I believe they favor live content. Like I think the algorithm, yeah, can you speak to
You,
that since you've
you,
actually done the live?
you, absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. That is so true. So from a from a podcast, let's talk podcast first, and kind of this kind of leads into the future of, right. So where do we see this all going? And I think, given the vast explosion of podcasting over the last few years, I mean, you're seeing the likes of Spotify now even shift into the video space. And when you look at Facebook, there's something like 8 billion video views are happening on the likes of the Facebook platform every single day. So where I see things moving to, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to be thinking about how do we share our knowledge and our expertise through using our voice, but then also taking on board the opportunity that exists by utilizing live video. Because as you mentioned, the algorithms, like you look at Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, etc., they're all like rewarding people now for being a content creator that creates video, because they know that people are on those platforms consuming video, that video content. And like I said, the number is 8 billion views a day. And Sarah and I were sort of talking about TikTok and how there's a big opportunity even to utilize the TikTok space now from a video perspective. I mean, I've only recently got it. I always thought it was sort of something for kids. I'm not really into dancing in front of. I was just sort of like, how the heck am I going to use this from for a business perspective? But knowing where things are going, knowing that platform is somewhere that creates an opportunity, and I'm going to say a window of opportunity for people to get into and start sharing their knowledge, their expertise, etc., through video on a platform like TikTok, because of the fact that the consumer's there. That's what they want, and that's why you're seeing the likes of Spotify make this pivot and make this shift to include video in in their toolbox, and allowing content creators to have video on there. I was looking at some other statistical data about sort of how we consume things, and you were saying earlier, podcasting being one of those places that makes it really simple and easy for people to consume your information, because they can be listening to it when they're driving in the car, when they're running, when they're doing the dishes, doing the housework, that sort of thing. It's really easy to consume because you're getting up close and personal. You're on people's ears, right? Really close to their brain to allow the message and the information to be absorbed. Then when we switch that up and we add another layer of, I suppose, what do we call it? Like utilizing our eyes to absorb the information, and you look at video views, it's like where the human is more likely to retain something like 95% of a message when they see it on a video. And when you're using a platform like this, like we are, I could put, video onto the screen. I can put words onto the screen. I can share imagery. And so you're starting to utilize all of our human senses to get more of the message through. So that's the reason, that's one of the huge reasons I absolutely love live video, because it allows you to do that. And we're seeing a lot of those major platforms take some, moves in that direction. I'm interested, what are your thoughts on sort of where you think podcasting is going, and what are you seeing in that space?
Yeah, I think video definitely is becoming more popular and common. I think, but at the same time, I think short form video is more,
Mm,
like you said, like TikTok, and then
mhm.
YouTube has their little YouTube shorts, and then Instagram reels and all that. I think like these 30-second to a minute, definitely maybe no more than 5 minutes. I think that's really what's gaining popularity. People like those. And people might say, oh, that's because of our attention spans. I don't know. But I think it's
Mhm.
so
We don't have a very long attention span these days.
so one thing I've thought about doing, because we were talking about TikTok earlier. Now I have a TikTok, but I haven't actually posted anything. I've more just been kind of occasionally consuming things to kind of see how it works. I only look at TikTok maybe like twice a month, but when I get on there, I'm on there for a couple hours at least, cuz it's like I feel like their algorithm is so spot on that like it just keeps sending you videos that they know you'll like. I
You
guess
watch that, so we'll serve you up this too. It's in a similar vein. Yeah. Yeah,
but
the algorithm is dialed
but
in.
but I'm like, okay, well what could I do? Cuz I don't want to just like do it just for fun. I want to, do it for business. Like how could I.
Mhm.
So I've kind of thought of different ideas because it has to be short and quick and whatever. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe like every video could be like 3 points or something, just very brief, like teaching something, but just
Mhm.
something I can teach like really, really quick within the. I don't know what the time limit is. I think they increased it now. I want to say you can do like 3-minute videos now, but I think it started with like 30 seconds or something.
Mm.
I'll have to look into that. But yeah, so I'm kind of trying to figure out how can, and then, I think repurposing content is really important too. So like for example, like with this, you're doing the live stream to a bunch of different places, which is possible through StreamYard, and there's some other ones as well. And so you're getting the algorithm that
Mhm.
they'll what would you call it? I don't know, algorithm juice or something. They're rewarding you, I guess, for going live.
Mhm.
Plus, you're allowed to have the interaction. You can put up stuff on the screen. But then I assume you can then download this video and put it up on YouTube, and then you can take the audio out of it, put it in a podcast, then create little clips like audiograms, put it all over social media, including TikTok. Um, there's a million different things you can do, but definitely repurposing content I think is important because maximizing maximizing your content so you're
It's
not like.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And that's you nailed it. That is actually the reason I went down this path, right? Because
Mm.
like you were saying right at the beginning, gosh, starting out doing a podcast, so do an hour's worth of a show, and then I've got, now I'm looking at 5 hours worth of post production. And so one of the things that I was really, really focused on is creating a system, because I don't have 5 hours a day to be, or 5 hours an episode to recreate everything else I need to recreate after the fact. So I've got this system kind of dialed in where I do 2 shows a week, and I can get the whole thing knocked out, which is live show, like you say, with the video, the audio, streaming to multiple different places simultaneously, taking that audio, turning it into my podcast. That podcast then goes out to, I don't know, 30 different platforms, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio. I mean, there's a whole bunch of platforms that's going to there. Then I pull the video out, and I mentioned to Sarah that after, like every time I have a guest on a show, I'm saying to them, right, this is what's actually going to happen during the show. We're going to go live. We'll have some guests here. Most of our viewership will come after the fact. So I don't, and this is one of the things that people get frightened of. Oh, I don't have very many people watching. Who cares? It doesn't matter. You're not here, you're here for the long term. And if you do the system right, you then create evergreen, perpetual content on a regular basis. And like you're saying, you then take this content and it becomes those little short snippets that now can go on TikTok, can now go on, various different other platforms. That's actually the biggest reason I absolutely love this whole live video format, not to mention the fact that all those other platforms love the live video format too, because their little algorithm elves come in and actually give you a bit of a boost and some help to get the information out there. So that's how it actually became my preferred platform. Not saying I don't love the podcast, because that is a big part of the entire strategy, is you must have a podcast that goes with this, that is part of the post-production strategy. But it does help. Like someone here saying, I'm way more visual, and I love to be able to watch something because I can absorb the information a lot easier if I'm actually watching than just reading or just listening to something.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think some people, I've noticed, like, their podcast episode might be really long, 1 or 2 hours even, some people, which I think is fine. I recommend personally under 45 minutes, definitely under an hour,
Mm.
but, it just depends. But so if someone has, like, an hour, 2-hour long episode, they'll find, like, a 10-minute clip that's really good and put that on YouTube. Um, because someone listening to a podcast, they might be inclined to listen for an hour or two because they're multitasking while they're doing it. But maybe there's a particular part that would be especially good to be on video. Like, let's say they're showing or they're talking about something and they have to show something like a graph, or I don't know. I'm just using that as an example. And then they'll take 10 minutes and put that on YouTube. And then, of course, you could take 30-second clips here or there. But yeah, I think you were saying, I guess after the show, you end up with like 50 pieces of content or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So the system that my team and I have created, it like actually allows you to create. You actually get more than 50 pieces of content from every episode. So it's a very specific system that we use. And maybe I can talk about the system on another episode actually. But yeah, that's essentially what we do, because it helps us to, I'm going to say, kill many birds with one stone. I'm not there having to do 5 hours an episode just to get a podcast episode out. So I just want to be clear on that. Like, the system that we've created not only allows you to do the podcast side of things, but it creates all my social media, because
Mhm.
I just, for someone who's time poor, which I am, I want to actually spend time with my family and enjoy my life, not just be, sat doing post editing all the time or posting on social media. So it really does. It just appeals to my lifestyle, being able to do it that way. When, like, if someone's starting out, like from a podcasting perspective, what sort of dollars can somebody expect to have to pay to get started in the world of podcasting?
Yeah. So, my podcast is called Frugalpreneur. So I'm very focused on everything frugal, or how to run a business on a budget. I actually have always run my businesses for under 100 a month. I think I'm down to like 60 a month now. But anyway, so if you want the totally free way to do it, which I actually don't recommend this particular path, but and then I'll go into the affordable way. So the free way would be to just record with like your earbuds, Apple earbuds, and record into like Anchor app. There might be some. I think there are some others podcast hosts that offer a free plan now, but they're usually limited to maybe
Mm.
5
So many
hours of
hours or something.
storage.
Yeah.
So you could do Anchor, which I think would always be free, but and this would be a whole other discussion, but there's some things that you kind of lose with that. But the way that I recommend is, so the mic that I'm using is called an ATR 2100, which I don't think exists anymore. But there's a Samsung Q2U, which is basically the same thing. And it's actually a little bit cheaper. But the mic was like $80. So I definitely recommend, spending $60 to $80 on a mic. And then going with a podcast host that you actually have to pay for because again, that's kind of a whole other topic. But like if something is totally free, there's usually a reason for it, or you become the product, and then it's this whole thing. They might insert ads, or you don't maybe fully control your RSS feed, things like that. So I definitely recommend going with a podcast host that you actually have to pay for. I started on Spreaker, which I think, at least at the time, they had a $7 a month plan. I'm now on Captivate, which I love, and I definitely recommend it. It's $19 a month. But anyway, so a mic, 60, $80. It's a USB mic, plugs right into your computer. I do recommend using headphones, which you could use, or earbuds, anything. Just so that, like, especially if you're interviewing someone, there's not like an echo coming
Yeah.
out. Yeah. So, I mean, you could use whatever you have lying around for that. And then, uh, most people have a computer, so you don't, you already have that part. And then podcast hosting, I think you can get anywhere from like $5 to $20 a month is the average. Yeah, so it's really
And and then
affordable to get.
and then maybe just some form of editing software. If you're going
Oh,
to edit your show
mhm,
and get that going, what sort of
yeah.
editing software would you recommend?
So I use Descript, and the plan that I'm on is only $15 a month. There's very few things that I pay for. I usually use like mostly free software or use the free plan. But when it comes to podcast hosting and then the editing software, I actually pay for those. But so Descript, it's like $15 a month. I think they do have a free plan. But you could record your podcast into there. Um, if you're doing an interview with someone, you can record video and audio if it's just you. So I use Squadcast if I'm doing a interview. Um, or you could use Zoom even. The
Mm-hmm.
quality isn't quite as good, but you could start with Zoom. Um, so yeah, Descript, you can also edit with Descript. And what I like about how you edit with them is that it creates a transcript. So now you have your transcript,
Mm-hmm.
and you can edit the audio and the video by just editing the transcript. So in one click, you could remove all the ums and uhs and filler words. Um, yeah, it's just they have other advanced functions if you want like the higher up plan, like overdub and all this stuff that you probably don't
Mm-hmm.
need starting out. But yeah, so Descript is what I would recommend for the software. You could use Audacity, that's free, but that has a little bit more of a learning curve and not quite as many bells and whistles.
Yeah. Great. Well, I mean, the platform that I particularly love, because I've looked at a few different ones, but the platform of our choice is Buzzsprout.
Oh,
So I absolutely love Buzzsprout, and inside of Buzzsprout, one of the cool features that they've got is like this. What do they call it?
Oh,
Magic
magic.
mastery.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so it will even out. So any peaks and troughs in our audio, it will do a lot of that audio magic for us, which is kind of great. And then enables it to be, sent out to multiple different platforms once you go live. So I love that. What do you recommend that people have their own, like actually put their podcast on their website? What's your view on that?
Oh yeah, definitely. So basically, you have to have a podcast host that stores your files, and then the host distributes the podcast out to all the directories like Apple, Google, Spotify. There's, like you said, like 30 different ones.
Bunch.
So it distributes them. You don't have to worry about it. But then usually most podcast hosts have kind of this embeddable player that you could get. You could either get a link or embed the link or like an HTML code that could either play like a single episode or it could have like all your episodes. It's like a player. So yeah, I definitely recommend having at least that on. Like, I wouldn't directly upload your audio and to your website.
Yeah.
That would take up a lot of space.
I mean, like you say, the cool thing is, I mean, I absolutely recommend that too. So I recommend, having your own, personal website, put your podcast on there, and it's just an embeddable code, really simple to do. And once you've got that code, and like Sarah said, you can have each individual episode on there, or just all of your episodes. So if somebody goes to your site, they can binge listen or binge watch all of those episodes, which is kind of cool. The other cool thing that you can do, and since you've spoken about sort of this whole transcript side of things, so descript and then being able to go through the transcript, removing all the ums and ahs, but then actually taking that transcript and then potentially even turning that into a blog, right? So you could put each individual show that you do, take the transcript and turn it into an actual blog, and again embed the individual show onto your website that way. Great way of being able to drive some traffic to your site, and then potentially down the track being able to use some other marketing tactics and strategies to be able to retarget people to expose them to some of the other things that you do.
Yeah, definitely. I recommend having a blog post, or I guess you could refer to them as show notes for each episode. Yeah.
Definitely. Is there anything else, like before we wrap today's show up, because I mean, gosh, me and you could talk about kind of live show and podcasts for ages and ages, because it's such a cool thing to be doing. And there's so many, I think, tricks and tips and things that I think you and I could both be sharing with everybody. And we've got some places that you guys can go to get some more tips and tools and resources from both Sarah and myself. And we'll make sure that we give them to you guys in the show notes, in the description. And I'll also mention them in just a few moments. But is there anything else that you think is really important for people to know or to understand when they're either starting out or wanting to start their own podcast, or maybe they've got a podcast and they just want to get some more traction, they want to get some more downloads on their podcast? Maybe give a few tips and hints on each of those subjects.
So one thing I would recommend is that even if you have a podcast, to guest on other podcasts, like I have a podcast, but I'm a guest on your show. And you could do this even if you didn't have a podcast. You could just do podcast guesting. But even if you have your own show, some people are like, well, if I have my own show, why would I need to guest? But you're reaching their audience in a medium that clearly they listen to podcasts. So it wouldn't be far-fetched for them to jump over and check out your podcast. So I think that it tends to work a lot better than, I mean, yeah, you could do paid ads or whatever, but I think being a guest on other people's shows definitely helps grow your podcast and by reaching more people. Yeah, and then go ahead.
I was just going to say on that note, obviously, like in my case and in Sarah's too, there are times where we might do a solo podcast and then you would also have guests. So to Sarah's point, and we talk about this in terms of, why do we want to do that? So when you're creating and you're doing a solo show, you're doing that to build your influence and build your authority. When we're on somebody else's show, we're doing that to build our network.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So a great way to be able to couple both of those together, do both as Sarah does and as I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, some people will just have a solo show. And that's a good point that if you have a solo show, that this is a way you can network by guesting. And I recommend, even if you have an interview show, to also have some solo episodes here and there, because like you said, that's an opportunity for you to kind of teach and show your expertise. Whereas when you have a guest on, sometimes or usually it's the guest that kind of is the educator or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Though I think this has been really good because you've been offering a lot of you haven't just been asking questions, you've been actually putting in your own input and you're talking about the different research that you've done and stuff like that. So I think this has been kind of more of a 50-50, which I think is actually ideal. But most interviewers, they probably don't offer as much expertise in that type of environment. So I think it's good to have solo episodes here and there. And I do that occasionally. And I think that's one goal I have for this year, is to do more of those. And the nice thing is those can usually be shorter as well. So sometimes you actually might get more downloads on those episodes. But yeah, I think that answered your question. I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, I mean, this is kind of cool, right? So, and I think it leads to just another pointer that I wanted to make was, when we talk right at the outset, like what's our intention, like why are you starting a show? You then go down the path of, well, what kind of show do you want to create? So like Sarah just said there, this has been more of a conversation. It's me and you chatting. It's me and you both sharing, our expertise and chiming in. And I think that makes for, in my opinion, it makes for a much better experience for the listener, because they're not only just getting one person's opinion, they're actually getting the opinion, the expertise, the knowledge and experience from two professionals rather than just one. So I personally have gone down the path of creating that type of show, but you don't have to. You could create a show that is just, very, I'm going to say very interview based, where it's more of a question and answer type scenario. And again, I think that comes down to a lot your personality. What sort of show do you want to create? How do you actually want your show to run, and how do you want it to flow? So there's a bunch of things that I think you should really, before you even jump into this, to think about before you start your own live show or before you start your own podcast, because that is going to help you to make sure that you do it and that you're part of that 6%, that you don't have podcast or live show fade, that you disappear off the face of the earth and your people can't find you, or don't where did she go type scenario. I think that's really important, and all of that work needs to be done at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, before you even hit record on your first episode, aside from personally recommending, getting a mic and a hosting platform and all those things, to first figure out what type of show you want to have. Is it going to be solo, interview? There's also like a panel or roundtable where you could have co-hosting where it's 2 hosts, or a panel or roundtable where it's like 3 or more people. So there's a few different types. And then obviously, rarely does a podcast, although with Joe Rogan it worked, I guess, but rarely does it work to have a podcast about everything. Like, obviously have a podcast that's very specific and niche. Like my podcast, for example, is about business, which is kind of broad, but so it's more niche down to like frugal, how to,
Yeah.
right. So, and then when it comes to naming a podcast, I don't recommend, unless you're some well-known person like Oprah. I mean, Oprah could start a podcast just being called Oprah or something. But like
Mm-hmm.
have a podcast title. You can say like yours and mine. We both say with and then our name, like with Tracy Wilson, with Sarah St. John. But the actual title itself should describe what the podcast is about versus it being like the Sarah St. John show or whatever. Because
Mm-hmm.
people are gonna
Mm-hmm.
be like, well, who is that and what is that about? Um, and I even, and most people don't do this, but I kind of felt like I should do it because the word frugalpreneur isn't really a real word. Most people understand what it means, frugal entrepreneurship, but I do have kind of like a little tagline or subtitle called Building a Business on a Bootstrap Budget. That,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of helps if people don't quite get it. Um, so if you do have kind of a cutesy name that maybe isn't a real word or something, maybe have like a
Mm-hmm.
little subtitle or something that explains it. But yeah, and then as far as podcast cover art, something that pops, that's very like that doesn't have a million different things going on. Ideally like one image and big words and all of that kind of stuff, a solid type of background. But yeah, so I, I don't know if you were wanting all that, but
No, that was great. That's awesome. Thanks, Sarah. And I totally agree with you. And it's interesting. In another episode, I'll even talk about the name the Unlock Show with Tracy Wilson, how that came about, and what
Mhm.
I've actually had to do to get this more niche. Because, like you were saying, like this is Unlock with Tracy Wilson is quite broad. Like, what the heck is that? So you've got to be very specific, like in your tagline and in the in some of the other descriptions that I would use to actually describe this show. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit difficult for people to understand. Well, what is that? What is that all about? So I think having having your tagline and being very, very clear about what it is that your show is about is really important. So there's a whole raft of things that I would recommend that you do. In the show notes today, there's going to be a number of different links that we're going to put in today's show notes, because there's a bunch of things that I think we've got that will actually help you guys if you're thinking about starting your own podcast or your own live show that are going to be useful to you. Let me give you a couple of things that you can go away and get right now. In fact, the lovely Sarah has made sure that she has given us some stuff that you guys can go and get your hands on if you so wish to. If you go to Sarah's website, thesarahstjohn.com/free, she's got three different books, ebooks that you can get your hands on there. There is The Frugalpreneur, how to launch, manage, and market your online business for under $100. I know she's talked about it in the show today, so go and get yourself a copy of that. She's also got The Authorpreneur, how to self-publish and launch a book and build your business. But the one that I think is most important for you guys to go and get today is The Podcastpreneur, which is how to promote and profit with a podcast. So go and get your hands on that. If you are interested in creating your own live show, you can also head on over to thefreedomseekersway.com/LSA. My business partner, Vicky Helm, and I have a 14-day challenge that we run inside of a private Facebook group. You guys are welcome to join it. You can go through it. It will take you through some things that you need to do to get yourself up and running, starting your own live show. So it really doesn't matter whether you're starting your own live show or you're doing a podcast. The same rules apply. There are similar rules that apply for both of them. I would recommend you either go and grab Sarah's, offer that she's given us today, or you head on over to freedomseekersway.com. I'll spell that out because it's a little bit hard to, it's got a her in it. So freedomseekersway.com/LSLA, which is Live Show Launch Accelerator, and join in the challenge there. Now, what I want to say to Sarah is thank you so much for being here today and sharing your knowledge and your expertise. such a cool space, right? To be in, either doing live shows or doing podcasting. Congratulations on being in, the 6% of, those many millions of people that are doing podcasting. So it's a big achievement to do that. So congratulations on that, Sarah. And thank you for sharing all your wisdom today. It's been fantastic having you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and congratulations to you too for being in the 6%.
I know, we're in the 6%ers. All right. Well, all right, guys. Well, hey, thanks very much for joining us. Like I said, go and get yourself copies of those freebies that both Sarah and I have offered to you guys today. And tune in again on Friday. So as you know, the Unlocked Show with Tracy Wilson goes live twice a week. So Wednesdays and Friday. This Friday, I'm actually going to be talking about podcasting and live show etiquette for hosts and for guests. So make sure that you tune in, and I give you some tips about, some of the etiquette, some of the I'm going to say polite things to do, using our manners, etc. whenever we're a host or a guest on other people's shows, that will actually help you to be asked to come back, to be invited back, or for people to want to share your show with their audience. Because if you do not treat them well, they're probably not going to share it. So that being said, have a fantastic rest of the week. And as you know, on the Unlocked Show, we encourage you to go out, live your life unlocked, because we know there is just no other way. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you guys again this Friday. Bye for now.